Welcome everyone to one of our famous Let's Talk series here. Something I wanted to talk about already for a little bit longer, but this week I wasn't in the office and I faced this challenge again. Distributed file systems, and so not only kernel could have been better with microkernels, stability and reliability and stuff, also file systems, this particularly networked distributed cluster file systems. And so yeah, this stuff is Stone Age old, totally aware of that. CODA, most of you probably never heard about this, an advanced networking file system. Yeah, so advanced it didn't advance much and most people don't know about this. Developed a long time, since 1987. It's a CMU there, by research groups there. So what is CODA and why it is promising for decades and yeah, not the most developed anymore, but anyway. And so this video is not about CODA specifically, but my point of what could have been better. So what CODA promised is disconnected operation for mobile computing. Yeah, since 1987, right? Mobile computing. Yeah, freely available, whatever. High performance through client-side persistent caching, server replication, security model for authentication, encryption. Also, yeah, 1987, right? With authentication and encryption. Continued operation during partial network failures and network bandwidth adaptations, good scalability, and yeah. So sounds super amazing, right? I think decades ago, like 15 years ago, I read a lot of papers. I even tried to use it 15 years ago. It wasn't totally amazing, but that's not the point. So what do we have instead? Instead, we got stuff, for example, like the common internet file system, CIFS here. Let me just check what we live stream here. That is of course developed by IBM, also as old as for DOS Interrupt 21 or so, somewhere that was even mentioned here. Similar long time, and more known as SMB, was it server message blocks or something? And yeah, server message blocks, SMB, in multiple versions since probably also 1980 whatever. Some message is written, but doesn't matter too much. In multiple versions and reverse engineered, of course, with Zumber since 1991 maybe, or at least a long time. Nowadays there are specifications. The problem with that is that, and that is also what we are obviously using here in our company, and a local area network, of course, that works fine, similar to NFS. So of course there are other file systems like NFS, the classic Unix like system, native networked file system. Also NFS in its earlier versions, of course, problems with authentication and encryption and stuff. But otherwise NFS and SMB CIFS are quite similar, as they are designed for local area networks and for that local area high performance low latency scenario. So where I have a problem is, and of course everyone is using that, and in those companies it of course works, but the real problem is if you try to use this remotely, say working at home like in this day and age, right, or otherwise traveling, you are at some conference, hotel, at some customer, and you try to access stuff. And that is where I wanted to have this, even I wanted this feature set, especially nowadays with smartphones and tablets and so on, disconnected operations, right? You do not always have the best internet. And what CODA did already since 20 years or so, probably at least 15, is disconnected operation, right? You are at a customer, you still have your most used files, for example, right? You want to discuss some invoicing details, some CAD files, some other document. And what most people do nowadays is just have a local copy, right? And not have this automated. Or, for example, you want to change an invoice or a computer edit design document or other standard document. And for example, either the internet is not amazing or you do not necessarily want to connect. And if you want to connect right now, I'm even live streaming. So let me check, hey, 0 frames. So the CIFS and SMB, at least the way macOS is using that, with our Linux server, and I had already a video, took me already quite some years to even optimize that to work locally. Yeah, CIFS, actually, ironically, CIFS and SMB is so crappy that even locally, at least with peak bugs, Apple implementation can be at times dock slow, which is of course, yeah, gigabit local area network, and it can be dock slow. And even more so remotely, right? So what is my issue? A customer asks me to change some invoice or asks for just regular office stuff, right? Asks for some discount or whatever, or some design document and so on. And it takes me, lo and behold, our small company, right? We're just a handful of people. We have just some thousands of documents, and it takes macOS to access an today, right? CEO tries to log in, of course, with VPN and stuff, adding a little bit more latency. And 2021, with the state-of-the-art Apple Silicon to state-of-the-art Zen 3 servers in Europe, the heart of the most high-performant bandwidth internet, right? It took me 5 freaking seconds just to navigate to the freaking invoice folder. I mean, it's 2021, it's faster. I call someone, hey, can you change the invoice for our customer, this detail? So, I mean, how crazy is it? This is like Stone Age. And how do most people work around this? Of course, I'm aware. I could start. So ironically, like most people, I'm aware most big business, they have remote desktop protocol computing, RDP, VNC, and variants of that. So it's literally fastest to stream a live video feed of your desktop, which is of course what RDP and VNC and all those remote frame buffer protocols are. So it's faster. I mean, how crazy is it, and how ironic is that it's faster and lower latency to stream a live video feed of your whole computing environment than it is to mount, open, connect, aka also otherwise known as mount, to a server and navigate to a couple of folders. And we don't have tens of thousands of invoices, right? Even our thousands of invoices take like macOS 5 minutes to just display in the Finder. And so yeah, of course the workaround, I wouldn't even call it a solution, right? The workaround, live video feed your virtualized clients, but that doesn't even solve all the issues, right? It doesn't support disconnected operations, so you don't have the most amazing internet. Yeah, you don't have a live video feed of your virtual machine guests there. It doesn't high performance, also probably not really. It doesn't have server replication or continued operation during partial network failures. So you travel by plane, by train, by car, or you climb the mountains or sail the world or whatever. And so this is all the stuff that CODA ironically implemented 15 years ago. I think I read some papers, they even had, of course it's not rocket science, it's not magic, or is it rocket science? Maybe it's actually rocket science. How does it work? It works, of course, with local caching. The implementation at CODA sucked big times. I looked into this 15 years ago. It had like one big log and performance hype. They have already high performance, but 15 years ago the performance was not that high performance. But given that with this latest Apple Silicon and Zen servers, CIFS is also not high performance. Yeah, I'm not saying CODA is amazing, and it probably didn't took off for that reasons, because one big log and so on. But the feature set would have been amazing, and instead of version of SMB, I would rather have enjoyed development of such disconnected, mobile-aware server systems. I'm aware there are distributed file systems nowadays, G-Cluster and CIFS and stuff. I played around with them, but the problem is those have a different feature set. G-Cluster, G-Cluster-FS, CIFS and others, they are more certainly designed for server-to-server distributed server infrastructure and not having an ad hoc single or like multiple single clients out in the world, traveling and stuff. And so that is of course a different feature set. And all of them have anyway the problem of being way more complex. It's like, sure, you could theoretically set a G cluster CIFS OS file system on all the clients. There are certainly workarounds for that, but that is not by design. What I envision would be as easy for users to connect as CIFS, SMB, NFS, disconnected local caching, replicating, allowing disconnected mobile use. And I think even those old papers had like application aware conflict handling, because what can of course happen if you have more than a handful of people that you edit the same file, similar to your Git pull requests or so, and you have conflicts. And I think, as far as I remember from the top of my head, 15 years ago, this paper, some of those design studies and papers already talked about application-aware conflict resolution, so that, for example, an Office document would display changes of user A edited this, and here are the changes. And there is so much that could be done, so amazing, but we are stuck with streaming whole remote desktop sessions. Another workaround that I should probably mention, and maybe then I should also look at the comments of you guys, is and by the way, they had here some, actually I wanted to open some design paper. Another workaround that most people nowadays use is of course cloud storage, but I don't want to use cloud storage because what that means is, well, by the way, why is this, or maybe documentation? I think this one here, they had here some fancy graphics that I remembered from studying this here, just some client program and servers and synchronization and stuff. And another solution is to use cloud storage, and the big difference is there. And this is also crazy, right? We rather set up whole web servers and serve users HTML pages with their files instead of having a proper file system implementation, because stuff like Dropbox or iCloud is of course a glorified web server. And the problem with that is, so not only can you, well, of course they have some operating system integration and stuff, but it's not like you can natively use all normal programs necessarily with that. For example, on Apple Silicon, they don't support Apple Silicon. And I heard, for example, Dropbox, they right now have like, we support Apple Silicon next year or something. We are working on that because Apple not allowing kernel extensions, as far as I'm aware, unless you degrade security as per the previous how do Apple Silicon Macs boot video. And the problem, however, is I don't want to give my files to Apple or Dropbox. I have servers and computers that can compute and serve. And sure, I could set up Nextcloud, so there are of course open source solutions, but the thing is, I don't want to browse a glorified web application thing that shows me some files. I want to natively have files in a file system and not like, also, yeah, things are complexity, right? Instead of designing a properly designed distributed file system like CODA, or they also had other alternative studies like Intermezzo or other file systems. This is just, sure, this is workarounds, but the crazy thing is, and that is probably the red thread through all of the today's IT landscape, is that we don't have properly designed and implemented systems and standards anymore. We have YOLO solution of startups like Dropbox or others creating some glorified web service for stuff like hosting files and accessing them from multiple clients and on the go, instead of what you would want is proper file system standards, right? And the consequence of this is, of course, instead of having a cross-platform solution like NFS or even, God forbid, SMB CIFS, we have web services that try to sell you their service and of course your precious intellectual property and customer data living on other people's server. And yeah, this kind of workarounds instead of proper, like, yeah, how systems are supposed to work, right? This is also the difference, the disconnect of we don't have systems that are somehow designed by function, but services that are designed for taking your data and keeping them hostage, or at least offering this value-added service for the sole purpose of selling you a service instead of having integrated solutions that work. So why does CIFS and NFS, for that matter, perform so poorly? For one thing, it's of course latency. The latency in a LAN is of course very a magnitude faster. So this is why there are just too many requests going over the wire, over your Wi-Fi, over your public internet infrastructure, so that especially UI systems like macOS and also Windows, or certainly certain Linux graphical file browsing applications as well, they also make a magnitude of order more requests, so that just listing, you would think listing 1,000 files is an easy task for a modern multi-core, multi-gigahertz PC. But for me, this is also the crazy thing, that this is like less efficient today to just work with some files than it was like 20 years ago for exactly this infrastructure and design decisions. So that is a problem here with the client program and virtual file system switch and server components, that like just listing 1,000 files takes like 5 seconds, because your application, especially Apple's Finder or Microsoft's Explorer, makes like not 1,000 requests, but that ends up to be 10,000 of requests that go with tremendous latency to your headquarter there, usually with another VPN, virtual private network encryption layer in between, making the whole stuff, yeah, crazy. Listing, welcome to 2021, listing 1,000 Office files takes 5 minutes. There you have it. And yeah, leave me in the comments below what is your take. Just like embracing cloud computing, giving Google and Dropbox and Apple and stuff all your files. What are your solutions to this? Just remote desktop everything, or certainly not a solution for disconnected and lacking bandwidth. And otherwise, what is your experience? What do you use? What cloud? I said this probably asked a year ago, what distributed file systems do you use? I need some solutions, but yeah, probably need to, yeah, I don't know, work on that. Anyway, let's look at the comments. What do we have there? And ironically, after like a decade of no development, CODA is these days a little bit developed. So in T2, I keep this updated, not that it would be the most usable, but at least it is there. We have a T2 package of that, and they didn't develop that much for like a decade, but the last years they started to update this a little bit again. Also certainly not like reworking it entirely for, I don't know, maybe they still have this big one global log that I saw there 15 years ago. But yeah, also all right, because comments there, AFS, so CODA is a direct descendant, as I write here, of the origins in AFS, Andrew file system. And yeah, it is crazy that this stuff is so old, going back to 1987, where I probably barely operated a computer, and yet in 2021, our only solution, and that is certainly the next problem, right? If that is another takeaway from this talk today here on my channel, is yeah, not properly designing standards, YOLOing stuff together, and the second thing, everything is web nowadays, right? Whether that's yeah, even document applications, right? Everything from meetings, all the Teams, Monday, Google, Microsoft, OneDrive, and all this fun stuff. And basically a little bit going back to mainframes and like centralized computing stuff with terminal front end. That's a crazy thing, right? We have supercomputers in our pocket, and phones and tablets, and here, yeah, 10 core Apple Silicon, basically glorified. Most people, I would say 99% of the people, using all their devices as glorified thin client devices nowadays, mostly as, yeah, the web browser became the new operating system of accessing mainframe-like centralized applications. A crazy thought that if you would have told me 20 years ago, I would probably be laughing about that idea. So let's look at the comments. And yeah, for me, I will probably, yeah, for me that means I will probably work setting better company infrastructure, more as sad as it is. I'm not the biggest fan of that, but to efficiently work like with this state of also the global health situation in the world, and more home office, obviously also for us, as you see here, more remote desktop setups here for us, simply for being able to work with Office documents efficiently, as crazy it is. And I need to continue to play with the distributed file systems, what works best for us, because we need also to improve our infrastructure for avoiding single point of failures in that regard. And I certainly keep you updated, probably some videos coming of QEMU virtualization setup and distributed file system setup and benchmarks. So you're welcome everyone. So let's take a look at the comments. What Linux do you recommend for PS4? I don't have a PS4, I only have PS3. PS4, yeah, if someone wants to donate one for me to maintain those patches as well, but otherwise not the greatest fan of x86. More risk. Anyway, more risk stuff is also coming here to this channel, so you probably want to share, like, and subscribe for all this risk fun. And ATX says, did you check out map per FS? No, I haven't. Only distributed file system, so that can do active replication and POSIX compliance. That sounds interesting. Closed source, yeah, that probably explains the thing. I wonder if I actually should get more into not this unsuccessful open source Linux distribution and YouTube business, but maybe I should actually get into providing professional distributed file system and virtualization solutions. Maybe that is a faster track to becoming millionaire, maybe. Fun fact, people who've worked on AFS worked on MapFS too. Patent application published online. Software patents are not a thing. Your country, one could implement it. Something. At least it's not necessary distributed file system, but maybe SFTP. Yeah, I mean, for most people, the question is always, wouldn't necessarily, yeah, I would need to test what is the performance, but I wouldn't necessarily think that performance also does macOS implement SFTP, probably not. SFTP, macOS, can you retrofit this? Another fun fact is, I think the CODA, because CODA was implemented in user space, so a little bit microkernel-ish, and for that the Linux kernel and other systems had CODA support, probably still has. We could actually check that live on this channel, but I guess the support would still be there. And yeah, CODA. And what a lot of other projects used CODA. I guess even file system from user space probably, until they added their own file system from user space support. At least as far as I remember, a lot of other projects, like here, hinting support for partial file caching. So yeah, that's still being developed. Maybe I should give that a try, although I don't have the greatest hopes. As that is the problem with CODA, is all the stuff sounded amazing on paper, but getting it to work, like I tried this like 2005 or maybe even before that, 2004, as recurring theme here, how long I am in this open source business. And it was difficult to set up 15 years ago. And when it finally started to work, it was not in the highest performance. And then I saw also it had some big global lock that prevented all high performance stuff. But my point is the feature set is exactly what I would want to have. And yeah, nothing so far really delivered that for me. So yeah, a lot of other projects and Fuse, I think initially used that, exporting virtual file system switch to user space. And yeah, I hope you learned something and have something to think about. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe for more discussions to come. Try to find my window with the live streaming. Yeah, macOS window management. So yeah, I hope you learned a couple of stuff that you might have never heard about: CODA, Intermezzo, G-cluster, CIFS, and find this discussion useful and especially a reminder of how, in my opinion, a little bit not as amazing developed the IT infrastructure is, and how much better it could be if people would have probably been more interested in more professional, scalable services, and we would not have ended up in the situation that we are today, that everything needs to be web service. And leave in the comments below what you think is everything as a web service, an amazing state of IT. What details would you like to see differently, and what is your experience, and so on. Don't forget to share and subscribe. I hope you learned something with it, took something away of it, and I hope to see you soon for all the next videos and live streams to come.